The emergency beacon screamed through the quiet corridors of Earth's diplomatic station, its red pulse painting the walls in urgent crimson. Ambassador Giwon nearly dropped her morning coffee as the transmission crackled to life, the holographic seal of the Galactic Council materializing above her desk with unusual intensity. Priority Alpha transmission for Ambassador Park Ji-won, the mechanical voice announced. Immediate response required. Ji-won straightened her uniform and activated the secure channel. The familiar blue-skinned face of Council Speaker Thymol appeared, but something was different. The usually composed alien's 3 eyes darted nervously, and the delicate gill slits along his neck fluttered with obvious stress. Ambassador Ji-won, we need human intervention immediately, Thymol began without his usual diplomatic pleasantries. The Alterian Empire and the Vexter Dominion have ceased all hostilities for exactly 72 standard hours. They've agreed to one final negotiation. Ji-won leaned forward, her heart racing. These two civilizations had been locked in a bitter conflict for over 3 centuries, their war machines grinding through star systems like cosmic locusts. The death toll was already in the billions. What changed their minds? She asked. That's the remarkable part. Thymol's voice carried a note of bewilderment. Both sides specifically requested a human mediator, not our best Centaurian diplomats, not the wisdom keepers from Arcturus Prime, not even the peace weavers from the Harmony Collective. They want a human. The implications hit her like a meteor strike. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago, barely a blink of an eye in cosmic terms. Most alien species still considered them newcomers. Curious but largely insignificant in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Do they give any reason? Ji-won asked, already knowing the answer. None whatsoever. The Alterian High Command simply transmitted, send us a human diplomat. The Vextar War Council echoed the same demand within hours. Our analysts are completely baffled. Ji-won's communication device buzzed with an incoming call from the transport bay. Captain Minho's weathered face appeared on her wrist display, his expression skeptical as always. Ji-won, I'm prepping the ship, but I've got to ask, are you sure about this? Minho's voice carried the weight of his 40 years in space. I've seen what's left after Alterian plasma bombardments. I've watched Vexter siegebreakers tear through battle stations like paper. These aren't species that suddenly develop peaceful intentions. Through her office window, Ji-won could see Minho's ship, the Harmony's Edge, its sleek hull gleaming under the artificial lights of the docking bay. The vessel was humanity's pride, not the biggest or most powerful ship in the galaxy, but equipped with the most advanced diplomatic suites and cultural analysis systems Earth could provide. The Council's data streams are showing massive fleet movements on both sides. Thymol continued, his image flickering slightly due to the long-distance transmission. If these negotiations fail, we're looking at a war that could consume the entire spiral arm. 3 star systems are already evacuating. Ki-won pulled up the tactical displays on her desk. The numbers were staggering. The Alterian fleet consisted of over 2,000 vessels, their crystalline hulls capable of channeling devastating energy weapons. The Vextar Armada matched them, ship for ship, their biomechanical craft bristling with weapons that could adapt and evolve during battle. Captain Minho has a point, she said to Thymol. Why would 2 ancient civilizations trust a species they barely know? We've been part of the Council for what, 50 years? That's nothing compared to their millennia of existence. Perhaps that's exactly why they want you, came a new voice. Dr. Sun-hee, Earth's xenopsychologist, stepped into Ji-won's office, her tablet displaying complex behavioral patterns. I've been analyzing the request patterns. Both species made their demands within hours of each other, but there's no evidence of communication between them. Captain Minho's voice crackled through the come again. Look, I'll fly you wherever you need to go, but I've got crew members with families. If this goes wrong, we're not just talking about diplomatic failure, we're talking about being vaporized by species that have been perfecting the art of warfare since before humans discovered fire. The weight of the situation settled on Ji-won's shoulders like a lead blanket. Outside the station, she could see the distant stars that marked the contested systems, their light carrying the echoes of ongoing skirmishes between the 2 empires. There's something else, Dr. Sun-hee added quietly. Our intelligence reports suggest both species have been studying human diplomatic records extensively. Every peace agreement we've brokered, every conflict we've resolved, they've been watching. Ji-won made her decision. Captain Minho, prep for immediate departure. Council Speaker Thymol, transmit the coordinates for the neutral meeting station. We leave within the hour. As the transmission ended, she stared out at the stars, wondering what ancient wisdom to warring civilizations thought humanity possessed. The neutral station hung in the void like a massive metallic flower, its 8 arms extending into space, each one designed to accommodate different alien atmospheres and gravitational needs. As the Harmony's edge approached, Jiwan pressed her face to the viewport, watching automated defense drones patrol the perimeter. These sleek, spider-like machines moved with mechanical precision, their sensors scanning every approaching vessel for weapons or hostile intent. "Look at the size of those fleets," Captain Minho muttered, pointing to the sensor display. On one side, the Alterian fleet formed perfect geometric patterns, their crystal-hulled ships gleaming like diamonds against the starfield. Each vessel was a work of art, with flowing lines that seemed to bend light itself. On the opposite side, the Vexstar Armada clustered in aggressive formations, their biomechanical ships pulsing with organic energy, hull plates shifting and adapting like living skin. Both sides brought enough firepower to glass entire planets, Minji observed, her tablet showing energy readings that made her pale. As Giwon's assistant and cultural analyst, she'd studied every failed negotiation in galactic history. The Alterians have 67 dreadnoughts, each one capable of channeling stellar energy through their crystal matrices. The Vexta brought their siege titans. Those massive ships can literally grow new weapons during battle. The docking process took over an hour, with each step requiring approval from 3 different security systems. Robot sentries glided through the corridors, their blue sensors scanning every visitor. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, with gravity plates that could adjust to any species needs and atmospheric processors that maintained dozens of different breathing environments. When the airlock finally opened, Guan stepped into a corridor that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were lined with memorial plaques, names of diplomats who had died trying to broker peace between warring species. 12 different mediation attempts were listed, each one ending in failure. "Ambassador Jiwang," a mechanical voice announced. Through hidden speakers, "Please proceed to Conference Hall 7. Your security escort will meet you at the intersection." The escort turned out to be a squad of peacekeeping robots, their humanoid forms designed to appear non-threatening while still being capable of stopping a rampaging warbeast. Their leader, designated Unit Alpha 7, had glowing blue optics and moved with fluid grace. "The Alterian delegation arrived 6 hours ago," Unit Alpha 7 reported in a synthesized voice. "The Vexstar delegation arrived 3 hours later." Both sides have maintained strict protocols, though tension levels are measuring at dangerous levels. As they walked, Minji pulled up holographic displays showing the history of the conflict. The crystal deposits they're fighting over aren't just valuable, they're unique in the entire galaxy. The Zarian crystals can store and amplify energy beyond anything science has discovered. One small fragment can power a city for years. "How many worlds are we talking about?" Joanne asked, though she dreaded the answer. The Zarian system has 17 planets, but the crystals are only found on 3 of them. Those 3 worlds contain enough energy to power entire civilizations for millennia. Both species have built their entire technological foundation around these crystals. The conference hall doors were massive, crafted from some alien metal that seemed to shift colors in the light. As they opened, Joanne felt the weight of history pressing down on her. Inside, the chamber was designed like an amphitheater, with 3 distinct sections separated by energy barriers. On the left sat Prime Alterian Huck, his crystalline features catching the room's light like a living prism. His skin was translucent blue, and geometric patterns flowed beneath the surface like circuit boards made of lights. Around him, 4 other Alterians maintained perfect posture, their movements synchronized with mathematical precision. They wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. On the right, War Commander Vexstar Solar dominated her section with raw presence. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, her body was a fusion of organic muscle and biomechanical enhancements. Plates of living armor shifted across her torso, and her eyes glowed with inner fire. Her delegation included warriors whose very presence made the air feel electric with barely contained violence. "The human arrives." Prime Hook's voice resonated like crystal chimes. "We have waited with calculated patience." "Patience." Solar's voice was a growl that seemed to come from deep within her chest. "My people bleed while we sit in this sterile box talking." Mingi leaned close to Juwan's ear. "Remember, think in mathematical absolutes. Everything is logical, but they can't adapt when their calculations prove wrong. The Vexta value honor above life itself. They'd rather die fighting than live with shame." The central podium rose from the floor, positioning G1 between the 2 delegations. Above them, holographic displays showed the contested star systems, with real-time updates of military movements. Ships were still arriving on both sides, their weapons powered but not yet aimed. 12 species have attempted to mediate this conflict, Unit Alpha 7 announced. The Zentarian mind linkers failed when both sides rejected emotional compromise. The Arcturian wisdom keepers were dismissed when their ancient knowledge proved irrelevant to modern warfare. The Harmony Collective's peace singers were ignored when their telepathic songs couldn't bridge the cultural divide. G1 looked between the two delegations, feeling the weight of billions of lives hanging in the balance. Outside the station, enough firepower to sterilize worlds waited for her to either succeed or fail. If we fail here, Minji whispered, the war will spread beyond these 3 systems. Both sides have allies, trade partners, defense treaties. We could be looking at a galactic war that lasts centuries. The room fell silent, waiting for the human to speak. The first 3 hours of negotiations felt like watching 2 freight trains, racing toward each other on the same track. Prime Hook stood at his delegation's presentation platform, holographic charts spinning around him like a mathematical ballet. Each crystal formation was mapped to the atomic level, energy output calculations, flowing in streams of blue light. The Zerian deposits contain 47.3 million terawatts of stored energy across the 3 worlds. Hugh's voice carried the certainty of someone who had never been wrong. Our civilization has calculated optimal extraction methods that would provide power for 1,847 years of current consumption. The Vextar methods are crude, wasteful, destructive. Behind him, his fellow Alterians nodded in perfect synchronization, their crystalline features reflecting the data streams. One of them, Jinho, activated a display showing Vextar mining operations. The images were devastating entire mountainsides carved away, crystal veins shattered by explosive charges. Precious energy leaked into space. War Commander Solar's response shook the conference room. She slammed her biomechanical fist onto her podium, the living metal of her arm plates shifting to accommodate the impact. Crude. Our ancestors mined these crystals when your species was still learning to count beyond their fingers. Her delegation rose as one, their armor plates rippling with barely contained energy. Lieutenant Young-Ho, Solar's second-in-command, activated his own holographic display. This one showed Alterian crystal harvesting perfectly precise, mathematically elegant, and impossibly slow. Your methods will take centuries to extract enough crystal to matter, Solar continued, her voice growing deeper with anger. While you calculate and recalculate, our enemies grow stronger. The dark fleet masses at the galaxy's edge, the hive, mines expand their territory daily. We need power now, not in 1,000 years. Giwon watched from her position between the 2 groups, her translator earpiece working overtime to convey not just words but emotional undertones. What struck her wasn't what they were saying, but what they weren't saying. Behind her, Minji took careful notes on her tablet, tracking stress indicators and vocal patterns. The dark fleet you mention, Hook responded, his tone growing cooler, represents a 15.7% probability of reaching our territories within the next 50 years. Hardly justification for destroying irreplaceable resources. 15%. Solar's laugh was like thunder. Tell that to the 17 worlds they've already consumed. Tell that to the survivors floating in escape pods. The argument continued for another hour, with both sides presenting increasingly detailed evidence of why their approach was superior. Robot attendants moved silently around the chamber, monitoring atmospheric conditions and stress levels. The peacekeeping units stationed near the walls began showing elevated alert status as tempers flared. Outside the massive viewport, both fleets maintained their positions, but G1 could see subtle changes. Ships were adjusting their formations, weapons systems performing diagnostic checks, shields cycling through power levels. The space around the neutral station crackled with barely contained violence. During a brief recess, while both delegations retreated to their separate chambers, Gaiwan walked to the viewport with Mingi. The view was breathtaking and terrifying. Hundreds of ships from 2 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, all waiting for negotiations to either succeed or fail catastrophically. They're not really arguing about mining methods, Guan said quietly, watching a squadron of Alterian fighters perform precision maneuvers that looked more like a dance than military exercises. What do you mean? Minji asked, reviewing her notes. Every point they've made has been about extraction, efficiency, and resource management. Look deeper, listen to what they're really saying. Juon pointed to the Vexta fleet, where massive bioships were extending sensory tendrils, tasting the cosmic radiation patterns. Huck keeps talking about waste and inefficiency, But what's he really worried about? Minji scrolled through her recordings, highlighting emotional stress patterns. His vocal indicators spike every time Solar mentions the Dark Fleet or external threat. Exactly. And Solar Juan watched as the War Commander's ship, a living fortress that pulsed like a giant heart, adjusted its position to keep the Alterian dreadnoughts in direct line of sight. She keeps talking about urgency and immediate needs, but her real focus is on what the Alterians might do with all that carefully extracted crystal energy. The revelation hit them both simultaneously. They're not fighting over who gets the crystals, Minji whispered. They're fighting because they're terrified of what happens if the other side gets them. When negotiations resumed, Giwon took an unprecedented step. Instead of returning to her neutral position, she walked directly between the two delegations, close enough to see the geometric pattern shifting beneath Hugh's crystalline skin and the biomechanical fibers flexing in armor. I want to try something different, she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Instead of talking about what you want, let's talk about what you're afraid of. The silence that followed was deafening. Both delegations exchanged glances, the Altarians in perfect mathematical precision, the Vexter with the fluid awareness of pack hunters. Prime Hook, Juon continued, when you see Vexter mining operations, what scares you most? Not the waste, the fear behind the waste. Cuke's crystalline features flickered, light patterns shifting in ways his species exhibited only under extreme stress. If they extract all usable crystals within 50 years, as their methods dictate, and if external threats prove greater than calculated, you're afraid they'll have all the power when the real enemies arrive, G1 finished. She turned to Solar, War Commander, when you watch Alterian precision extraction, extending over centuries, what terrifies you? Solar's biomechanical plates rippled, her natural armor responding to emotional stimuli. While they calculate perfect angles and optimal yields, threats multiply if they control crystal distribution, if they decide who gets power and when. You're afraid they'll use their monopoly to control your people's survival. The conference room fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems and the distant rumble of fleet engines maintaining position. For the first time in the negotiations, both sides were looking at each other instead of at their data displays. Neither species had ever considered that their opponent might be driven by the same fundamental fear that losing access to the crystals meant extinction. When the galaxy's real threats finally arrived, the breakthrough came at the worst possible moment, just as both delegations began to acknowledge their shared fears. Emergency alarms started blaring throughout the neutral station. Red warning lights bathed the conference hall in crimson, and the massive viewport revealed the source of the Kayasa. Dark Fleet scout ship had emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Impossible. Prime Huck's crystalline features flickered with rapid calculations. Our sensors showed no hyperspace signatures, no advance warning. War Commander Solar was already on her feet, her biomechanical armor plates shifting into combat configuration. The shadows have found us. This is exactly what we feared. The Dark Fleet vessel was unlike anything in known space. Massive dark energy that seemed to bend light around itself. Tentacles of pure darkness extended from its core, probing the system's asteroid belt like a predator testing the water. Both fleets are powering weapons, Unit Alpha 7 announced, its robotic voice carrying unprecedented urgency, detecting massive energy buildups across all vessels. If they engage the Dark Fleet scout, it will signal our location to the entire hive. That's when the miracle happened. Through the chaos and alarm bells, a familiar voice crackled over the communication system. Neutral station control. This is Engineer Dongyun aboard the research vessel New Horizon, requesting immediate docking clearance. Guwon's heart leaped. Dongyun was humanity's most brilliant crystal engineer, the man who had spent the last decade studying Zarian fragments in Earth's laboratories. If anyone could solve this crisis, it was him. Priority docking approved. The station's AI responded. Bay 7 is being prepared for emergency arrival. Within minutes, Dongyun burst into the conference hall, his hair disheveled from the frantic journey, carrying a metallic briefcase that hummed with contained energy. Behind him, two assistants, wheeled in a complex apparatus that looked like a fusion of Earth technology and alien crystal matrices. Sorry I'm late, he panted, setting up his equipment with practiced efficiency. I've been monitoring your negotiations from Earth, and I think I have something that might help. He activated the device, and suddenly the conference hall filled with the most beautiful light anyone had ever seen. Floating above the apparatus was a perfect Zarian crystal, identical in every way to the natural formations that had caused centuries of war. Synthetic Zarian Dong-Yun announced, his voice filled with quiet pride. We figured out how to replicate the atomic structure using a combination of stellar energy and temporal compression. One small Earth laboratory can produce enough crystals to power both your civilizations for millennia. The silence was absolute. Prime Hook approached the synthetic crystal, his natural ability to analyze crystal structures through resonance revealing the truth. It was identical to natural Zarian in every measurable way. The energy signature is perfect, he whispered, his mathematical mind struggling to process the implications. But how is this possible? Our greatest scientists calculated that artificial synthesis would require the energy output of an entire star. That's where human thinking comes in handy, Dong-Yun grinned, despite the gravity of the situation. Instead of trying to replicate the geological processes that create natural crystals, we asked a different question: what if we could convince matter to believe it was already a crystal? War Commander Solar's biomechanical sensors were also analyzing the synthetic crystal, her armor plates shifting to accommodate new data flows. This changes everything. If both our peoples can have unlimited access to crystal energy, the war becomes pointless, Hook finished, his crystalline features showing something his species rarely exhibited. Wonder. But Juwon knew that technology alone wouldn't heal centuries of mistrust. The synthetic crystals solve the resource problem, she said, moving to stand between the two leaders. But they don't solve the trust problem. You've been enemies for so long, you've forgotten why you became enemies in the first place. Outside the viewport, the Dark Fleet scout was moving closer, its tendrils of darkness probing deeper into the system. Both the Alterian and Vexter fleets maintained their positions, but weapons remained powered and ready. Tell me about the first time your peoples met, Giwon said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade through silk. Before the wars, before the hatred, what happened? Prime Hook's light patterns shifted to deeper blues, colors associated with memory and reflection among his people. It was 847 standard years ago. My ancestor, Prime Architect Baikun, led the first Alterian expedition to the Zarian system. We thought it was uninhabited. Our people had been mining those worlds for generations, Solar added, her voice losing its usual growl, becoming something softer, more painful. My ancestor, War Leader Hiron, watched your ships arrive like falling stars. She thought you were the gods of legend, coming to judge our worthiness. The first meeting was peaceful, Hugh continued, his mathematical mind accessing historical records with perfect accuracy. Baikun was fascinated by Vextar mining techniques. Hiron was amazed by Alterian precision engineering. They spent months learning from each other. What went wrong? G1 asked, though she suspected she already knew. Solar's biomechanical armor dimmed, her natural bioluminescence fading to match her emotional state. Fear. Outside threats. The hive minds attacked a border colony, and suddenly everyone needed more crystals, more weapons, more power. Trust became a luxury neither side could afford. My people began calculating optimal resource distribution, Hugh added, his voice barely above a whisper. Every calculation showed that sharing meant vulnerability, that cooperation meant potential betrayal. So you stopped trusting each other, Juwon said simply. You let fear turn allies into enemies. The Dark Fleet scout was now close enough that its presence could be felt, a cold, hungry void that made every living being in the system feel like prey. But inside the conference hall, something remarkable was happening. I remember the stories, Solar said, looking directly at Huck for the first time in hours. Hiron used to tell her children about the crystal singers, the beautiful beings who could make light dance. She said they were the most honorable warriors she'd ever met, because they fought with wisdom instead of strength. Baikun wrote in his journals about the star dancers, Hugh replied, his crystalline features brightening. The fierce protectors who moved like living poetry. He said they had the strongest hearts in the galaxy, because they chose to hope even when surrounded by darkness. For a moment, the ancient enemies saw each other not as threats to be calculated or obstacles to be overcome, but as the descendants of two peoples who had once looked at the stars together and dreamed of a better future. Outside, the Dark Fleet scout began to retreat, perhaps sensing that its prey had suddenly become much more dangerous than expected. The signing ceremony took place 3 days later, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The neutral station's grand assembly hall had been transformed into a celebration of unity that stretched across species barriers. Alterian crystal formations created cascading waterfalls of light, while vexed by luminescent gardens pulsed with living colors that responded to the emotions of everyone present. Prime, Hugh, and War Commander Solar stood side by side at the ceremonial podium, their hands, one crystalline, one biomechanical, resting together on the treaty document. The parchment itself was a marvel of galactic cooperation, written in 17 different languages and sealed with energy signatures from both civilizations. Today marks the end of 847 years of conflict, Hugh announced, his voice carrying across the assembly hall through crystal resonance amplifiers. The Alterian Empire and the Vexter Dominion hereby establish the Zarian Cooperative Alliance. The treaty was comprehensive beyond anything previously achieved in galactic diplomacy. Joint mining operations would be established on all three crystal worlds, with Alterian precision and Vexter efficiency combined to maximize output while minimizing environmental impact. Engineer Dong Yun's synthetic crystal production would be scaled up, with facilities built in both empires' territories. But more importantly, the treaty established something unprecedented: a permanent defensive alliance. Both fleets would patrol the galaxy's outer rim together, protecting trade routes and defending against threats like the Dark Fleet. The very enemies who had once prepared to destroy each other would now stand as unified guardians of galactic peace. Minho watched the ceremony from the observation deck, his weathered face showing rare emotion. 40 years I've been flying these trade routes, he murmured to Mingy. I've seen wars that lasted centuries, conflicts that consumed entire star systems. Never thought I'd live to see enemies become allies. Below them, the celebration continued as delegations from dozens of species arrived to witness the historic moment. The Zentarian mindlinkers performed their traditional harmony dance, their telepathic abilities creating visible auroras in the station's atmosphere. Arcturian wisdom keepers shared ancient songs that had been sung at the founding of the Galactic Council itself. But the most remarkable sight was the transformation of the two fleets outside. Alterian dreadnoughts and Vextar bioships had arranged themselves in a massive double helix formation, their combined lights creating a spiral galaxy of stars that could be seen from neighboring systems. What had once been instruments of war had become symbols of hope. As the formal ceremonies concluded, Ji-Won found herself approached by an unexpected visitor. Council Speaker Thymol materialized in the station's diplomatic lounge, his three eyes bright with curiosity and something that might have been amazement. Ambassador Gi-Won, he said, settling into a chair designed to accommodate his unique physiology. I must ask, how did you know it would work? 12 different species attempted to mediate this conflict. Some of the galaxy's most brilliant minds failed where you succeeded. Ji-Won smiled, sipping her coffee while watching the celebration continue through the massive view. Honestly, I almost didn't. The breakthrough came when I realized we were all asking the wrong questions. What do you mean? Every previous mediator focused on the logical problems: resource, distribution, territorial rights, extraction methods. But logic wasn't the real issue. Fear was, and fear isn't logical. Thymol's gill slits fluttered with interest. But fear is a universal emotion. Every species understands fear. Understanding it and dealing with it are different things, Ji-Won replied. Most species try to eliminate fear through logic or suppress it through discipline. Humans do something different. We acknowledge that fear and hope can exist in the same space, that enemies can become allies, that contradictory truths can both be valid. Before Thymol could respond, Engineer Dong Yun joined them, his synthetic crystal device now packed away but his excitement still evident. You know what, the really amazing part is, he said, settling into a chair. Both species had the technology to create synthetic crystals decades ago. The Alterians had the mathematical models. The Vexter had the energy manipulation techniques. They just never thought to combine their approaches. That's the human difference, Minji added, approaching with a tablet full of data. We're not the smartest species in the galaxy, or the strongest, or the most technologically advanced, but we're apparently the only ones who naturally think in terms of synthesis rather than opposition. Thymol's three eyes focused on each human in turn. This is precisely why both empires requested a human mediator. Word has spread throughout the galaxy about your species' unique abilities. The Harmony Collective calls it bridge thinking. The Arcturian Wisdom Keepers describe it as seeing connections where others see walls. What are you saying? Ji-Won asked. I'm saying that humanity has developed a reputation across the galaxy. Not for military conquest or technological superiority, but for something far more valuable: the ability to find common ground where others see only conflict. Activated a holographic display showing diplomatic requests from across the galaxy. The Spiral Confederacy and the Ring Worlds have been locked in a trade dispute for 30 years. The Crystal Singers and the Void Walkers refuse to share the same space stations. The Hive Collective wants to establish peaceful contact with organic species, but can't overcome the fear response their appearance triggers. The list went on and on. Dozens of conflicts, misunderstandings, and diplomatic deadlocks that had persisted for decades or centuries. All of them now had one thing in common: formal requests for human mediation. "We're not asking you to solve every problem in the galaxy," Thymel continued, "but your species seems to possess something that others lack. The ability to hold contradictory ideas without breaking, to find synthesis where others see only thesis and antithesis." Captain Minho joined the group, his timing impeccable as always. "It's because we're stubborn," he said with a grin. "Every other species in the galaxy is logical. When they encounter a contradiction, they choose one side or the other. Humans are too stubborn to give up on either side, so we keep pushing until we find a way to make both sides work." "That's not stubbornness," J1 realized, watching the celebration continue outside. "That's hope. We refuse to accept that conflicts are permanent, that enemies can't become friends, that problems can't be solved." As the Harmony's Edge prepared for departure, Juwan stood in the observation lounge one last time, watching the combined Altarian-Vextar fleet patrol formation. The sight was breathtaking. Former enemies now working together, their combined technologies creating something more beautiful and powerful than either could achieve alone. "So what's next?" Minji asked, joining her at the VIEWPORT. G1 smiled, thinking about the list of diplomatic requests waiting back on Earth. "I guess we keep building bridges. That's what humans do." Outside, the stars shone with the promise of a galaxy where differences could become strengths, where ancient enemies could become eternal allies, and where the simple human belief that things could always get better might just be the most powerful force in the universe. The